Alright, so this is our last language arts lesson, and this is going to be kind of short. So the last part of your realistic fiction is coming up with a good closing, okay? So Friday we were talking about dialogue, so make sure that you do have some conversation between the characters in your story. So you will get points taken off if you do not have dialogue, okay? So make sure your dialogue has quotation marks and make sure it's evident or you know who is talking, okay, by either putting the name of the person after it, like whatever your character name is. Tracy said, I got bit by a snake. Remember, that was mine. So I would put, I got bit by a snake would be in quotation marks, and making sure that, you could say Tracy screamed instead. So you don't try to always use said when you're doing your dialogue. Make sure if it's exciting, maybe they exclaimed, or maybe they yelled, or maybe they, I don't know, you can think of another word for yells. So we're using kind of some synonyms since for yelling or exclaiming, or I'm sure some of you could think of some words now. So anything else than said, or you could say Tracy started, and then whatever I started to say. So think about that when you're doing your dialogue, okay? So you're going to see an example in a second of dialogue as well. And we're going to pause and talk about that in a second. So let's talk about your closure. So this is your closing. This is your conclusion. So the whole point is to bring everything in and wrap it up. Okay, you don't want to leave the reader hanging. Okay, this is kind of like the end of a book, the end of a story. So you need to make sure that you leave the reader satisfied, that there's nothing that they're missing. Make sure you talk about, make sure it's not necessarily, remember, you're not talking, but through it, your characters, there's closure for your characters. It's the solution normally to the problem. Make sure whatever the problem was, that it was answered before you close out your realistic fiction. And just make sure you like I said, don't leave anybody hanging, wondering what's going to happen next. Okay? Since we don't have a chapter 2 or a book 2, we want to make sure we tie everything up to a good point at the end. Okay? So you're going to provide a sense of closure to the realistic fiction. And if you need to, you can talk with the partner during your small group time to help you with that. Probably the small group time on Tuesday, okay? Because you've already had your small group time today. So small group time on Tuesday, you can discuss that. So here's an example. Let's go back to dialogue real quick. You see it says Zane said here, no calls, no emails, Zane said. And then he says, I think we should name him Shadow. He patted Shadow. Now silky fur, still no purr. So this one they use said, but then down here it says Mom began. She started to say something. Maybe it's a bit too early, and he said dash, which means she probably got interrupted, or maybe she just stopped talking. But then she added, that's a good name for him. Okay, so she was about to say something, and she kind of held back. Okay, she's like, oh, never mind, and she changed what she said. So these are your quotation marks. Make sure your dialogue that you're adding in has quotation marks, and make sure it has whoever's talking and something like exclaimed or explained or began or said. Make sure it just goes with what is happening in your story. All right, and then here's a little bit of a narrator talking. So 2 weeks passed. Remember, you're the narrator. You're telling the story. One afternoon, when the cat leaped into the sofa for a nap, Mom said, and so they use said here, Shadow's making himself right at home. I'd better get out Cookie's old cat bed from the basement. And then Zane hesitantly. So hesitantly tells you kind of how he said it. So hesitantly kind of means that he's really hesitant on what to say. So he's thinking, should he say this or not? So he's like, does that mean Question mark. Seems we got a new family member, his mom said, just then Zane finally heard Shadow purr. Okay, so if you want to try to explain more how your character's kind of feeling and how they're talking, you're not going to always use said. You're going to say something like said excitedly or said cautiously. Or you can add something after said to better show people kind of like the tone in which is what they're saying. So it's about giving the people the tone. So if he didn't put hesitantly in there, then I would not have known to kind of say that slow and to say it kind of like I'm thinking about it. So whatever you put here for said or for your dialogue or after your dialogue kind of tells the reader, which is going to be me or one of your partners or one of your friends in the class, tells them kind of how to read it. Okay? And so you see that this kind of brings it to a closing here. So the whole problem was of this mentor text, that's what we call it. The whole problem was that they found a cat. Okay, that was the problem was the cat was underneath their porch. That was the main problem from the beginning. Okay, so this at the end kind of wraps everything up. They ended up doing what? They ended up giving the cat a home. Okay, so all throughout were all of the events that led up to the cat having a home. They looked for other people. They put signs up. They tried to find the owners, if they had any owners. But finally, they decided to keep the cat. So that kind of brings the whole story to a closure. Okay? So that's what you're going to do, boys and girls. Make sure you fix any dialogue issues. You're supposed to be working on that during small group today. And now you need to start figuring out your closing. So we're coming to the end now. We're at the end of week 2 of unit 2. So we need to start wrapping everything up and start getting your realistic closing starting to happen, okay? All right, so we will work on, you have a little bit of time left in writing today to kind of start continuing to work on your stuff and start wrapping up all your events and have a good closing to your problem. So a good solution to your problem. All right, boys and girls, so that's what you are going to be working on today in writing. And if you need help, you may get with a partner in this little bit of time before before your break, or I think you already had your break actually. So before win time, you can get up with a partner to talk about your closings, okay? Or you can talk about your dialogue. But it should be productive talk. It should not be playing around. So you know who you are, who should not be hanging out with each other because you can't concentrate or focus. You know who you are. Chase, Asher. Okay? So make sure you're not working together unless you can work together well and productively. All right, boys and girls, so that's our last language arts lesson, and you will have more time tomorrow to finish up your closings and to go ahead and finish up your dialogue. All right, have a good one.